I'm okay in the background. I'm nothing wrong with that.
You turn the lights on there.
Look like the 10 pins at the end of a bowling alley.
Yeah.
Okay, directors, it is now 9:30. Do we have Nomba and Brenda in the room? The virtual room.
We do have Director
There's
Anderson.
Nova.
We have not seen Director Lee at this point, but we do have Director Anderson, I believe.
Okay, we'll give her a couple more minutes. She's sometimes
Here.
racing, so if you don't mind.
So I gave Director Lee, I just did the request to join there because often she says she doesn't get it. So I've given her the request to join. So.
You mean the one by email, whatever.
No, there's a little tab on Teams here. If somebody didn't get the email, this, that, or the other, you just hit this request to join, and it nudges them. So,
Yeah, okay.
For some reason, she struggles getting the Strathcona Commission one, and I almost always get her on doing that. So.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to hold you up, but I hate to leave anybody out. And I know they're probably right there.
You should give her a phone call, see if she's having technical problems.
Well, I can see it's calling her. Again, I've hit this thing 5 or 6 times, so. Brenda having challenges?
Her line's busy, so could mean she's, I don't know.
John and River says he hasn't called them, so.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to go ahead and start. Can't wait forever. So it's 9:32. So we do have a confirmation of a quorum. Is that correct, Tom?
That is correct.
Okay, so call this meeting to order of the Electoral Area Services Committee of Wednesday, October 6th. And the first item is the adoption of the public agenda.
Adoption.
Is there a seconder?
Second, and I have one proposed addition.
Okay, well, maybe you could do that before we adopt it then. Go ahead.
Yeah. I would just like to offer a brief verbal update to the committee on a call I had yesterday with the small community paramedic initiative meeting that we had asked for, if the committee is interested.
Okay, that'll come under new business.
Thank you.
Remind me, please. Okay, so it's funny, all these computer screens, but I don't have a pen, so I can't make notes. Okay, so on the adoption of the amended public agenda, all those in favor? Or sorry, anyone opposed? So that's carried. We have no petitions and delegations. We have the adoption of the previous meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Seconder, thank you. Any additions, changes, whatever? Okay. Consider those adopted. Any business arising from the minutes? Public considerations, there are none that I have listed. Staff reports. Okay, this is a development permit application for Duyan Park on Quadra Island. And after receipt,
Move receipt.
I'd like,
Second,
okay, moved and received. I'd like to ask if I may, since we don't have a vice chair here yet, whether I should speak from the chair, or if you'd like me to, I'll step down and we'll pick a chair.
You can go ahead as far as I'm concerned.
I'm not super fussed, but given the substantive matter, probably wiser to offer the chair to one of us for a moment.
Okay, so Gerald, would you be so kind as to accept the temporary chairmanship of this item?
All righty. Go ahead, Jim.
Any objection to that?
Good morning, everyone. It's Brenda. I'm sorry I'm dialing in late. My computer's not working.
Okay, yeah, we've been trying to get a hold of it.
Yeah, I've been
moved on.
trying.
Okay, we've moved on to staff reports. I had to start the meeting. It was getting late. We're on development permit application for Duyan Park. Since you weren't here, we just asked Gerald to be the chair. If you would like to take the chair as the vice chair, then you
Sure,
may take.
okay. I'll take the chair, but nobody can see me, so maybe Gerald should just vice chair for this meeting.
I don't mind. I've got my video turned off anyway, Brenda, so it doesn't make a difference, whatever you like.
Yeah, I'm only on the phone, so I'll just let Gerald carry on with it.
All right. So on receipt, do we have any comments? Jim?
Well, I'm not sure my comments are on receipt. I think I guess I could make them here. And then I will have an alternative motion after we've received it.
All right, then
So-
anyone else on receipt?
Second,
Hearing no comments then, is anyone opposed to receipt? We'll call that carried. Item B, that the committee recommend the development permit DP 1C 21 Duyan Park as attached to staff report dated June 4, 2021 be approved. Now the corporate author be authorized to issue permit upon receipt of the landscape performance bond in the amount of $12,171.90.
So
Okay,
moved.
so I'd
and
like to make an alternative motion to that.
All right,
And that motion would be that this item be deferred until we have a report back from the Ministry of Highways on the traffic flow that will be produced by this use. And then I have my comments on that.
second,
comments on deferral?
Okay, so this issue is a really tough one because it is supposedly within the zone, permitted within the zone. I want you to remember that these zones were created in the late 60s, early 70s. So uses, etc., studies that may have been done would have been done for that time. That's like, what, 40 years ago? Okay, so I asked a couple of times some very specific items that were not considered by staff entirely, and they do not meet our requirements. I personally do not feel this is qualified to be a development permit. This is a big deal. This is, in my opinion, should require a rezoning, a new zone created. It's not I mean, DPs are for minor variances, and this certainly is not. So my points were there were two. The first one was on the dark sky policy. Now, I admit that Mr. Park has been very good about complying with dark sky policy to an extent, but he has stated in his letter that the outside of the building is going to be completely surrounded by down-facing lights, which are correct, but it's to illuminate the building itself. Okay, so the entire building exterior will be illuminated to the entirety of Guathiaski Cove and people coming in and off the ferry. And I have no idea what the neighbors above would have to think about this, because I don't think they would have even thought about this. It certainly wasn't in the staff report. It was just in the letter from Mr. Park, which is embedded in the staff report. So somebody with a sharp eye may have caught it, they may not. But I don't feel that those people have been acceptably consulted or whatever. So, and it's right at the end, if you want to go through the report, it's right at the end of Mr. Park's letter, about the second to the last little paragraph. Number two is that I asked for a traffic study of the access egress into this four-way intersection that is the subject of continual controversy and occasional accidents. It's one of the most congested spots on the island with the ferry traffic now, and that's going to be every half hour starting in April. So it's not every hour, it'll be every half hour. There'll be continual flow on and off. And then the school buses, they use it. There's 3 school buses. They use it 4 times a day to come in and out of the DFO parking lot to drop off and pick up kids. So they have to come across 5 lanes of ferry traffic, waiting traffic, and 2 lanes of ferry waiting traffic going up the hill from this intersection. So it's and there's also a lane for through traffic to come down and turn into the parking lot. So it's really just a disaster waiting to happen. The ferry, the Harbor Authority parking lot is always full. And that's everything that you see off to the north side of the ferry lineup. That's owned by the Harbor Authority, or managed by them, I should say. So I've contacted the district manager of highways to get this study done, since there does not appear to be any effort from the applicant. And this property would not have had any study whatsoever done since the very early 70s or late 60s, and it would no longer apply. It could not possibly be accurate from that time to this time with regard to the amount of traffic and the use of the property itself. That zone would have never anticipated a convention center, which is, if you realize that it's a major building facility of a convention center that supposedly will hold 90 people, and I'm not sure how many vehicles that would represent. I'd say they figure 1.8 or something per space in a rental, so where the hotel is. But even if you just took 2/3, it would be 60 vehicles, additional vehicles, in and out of the property, trying to get onto that road. And I think that, we really don't need any more trouble at that intersection. So I'd like them to do a study and see if there is something that, if it is a problem, that it can be mitigated somehow. And if it can't, then give that report to us. But I don't feel that the intent, that there's been I'm not going to call it a lack of understanding, but there's just we're not looking at the intent and understanding of our local area and its character, or local area plan, its character and its intent. And, you know, that's something that just sort of flowed out of the 1970s. It's different now. So I'll stop with the blabbering, and I have in my head, I've been going through what are my two options, and one is to defeat the proposal right now, and the other is to defer until a traffic study is done by the ministry. So I'm going to make the motion rather than what's there in B. I would like to move that this item be deferred until we have a report back from the Ministry of Transportation and Highways on the traffic flow that will be produced by this use. That's my motion.
I'll
I'll need a
second that. I'm seconding.
Alrighty, any other comments on deferral?
I have a question through to staff that might have been better in receipt.
Go ahead,
But it has to do with the public engagement, if I might.
go ahead.
Thank you. I noted in the staff report that there was mention of a limited time for public engagement via survey, and that there were 4 or 5 responses to that, and that public engagement was suspended such that the applicant could consider doing a public engagement, which the applicant declined to do. So my question through to staff then is, I understand that was suspended such that the applicant could choose to do something. When the applicants declined, I'm wondering why that public engagement was not taken up again. And how this relates to this motion really is we would have potentially more information, or there's been a desire on the part of the director for the area to have some kind of community engagement on this, given that the zones are so old, which speaks to the whole other matter that we hopefully will actually get into substantively in budget discussions this year. But I would hate to defeat a variance permit application, development permit application that meets all of the development permit standards, because I think that puts us in a very precarious position without a substantive reason to do so. And I would truly like to know from the public if they care about this at all. So I would like to know why that public engagement wasn't re-engaged. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
All right, does staff have a comment first?
Aniko can comment on that.
Thank you. Through the chair, staff took the opportunity to conduct some public consultation in light of difficulties of holding in-person open public meetings. However, the area director did not support that form of consultation and asked that the survey be removed from the website. Following the applicant advising that they were not willing to hold a public information meeting on their own will, and the fact that staff does not have a budget to do so, given that that's not a requirement as part of a development permit, we decided that we would proceed back to the Electoral Area Services Committee based on the fact that all responses received were positive and in light of the application substantially complying with all of the development permit requirements of the bylaw. Thank you.
Any further comments?
If I could, yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jim.
The survey by internet and hard copy, if necessary, was not discussed with me at all. It was basically a staff initiative to try and do something that they felt was a good idea versus a public meeting because of situation right now. Once the issue went through the committee and the board, and we asked for the public meeting, then staff were required to take it down. It was not a request by the director to take it down. I didn't know it was up. So anyway, staff did exactly as they should have. And the information that we would gather from a public meeting, I think would be very different than what we would gather from anything via a survey on the website. So, and you know, most people don't look at our website every day. I certainly don't, and so they wouldn't have even known it was there, let alone comment on it. So, I think, you know, the public engagement is something that the applicant chose to not engage in, and that's his right to do that. But it's still, as the area director, it is my duty and obligation to ensure the safety of my citizens and the proper use of our bylaws, our OCP, all of the things that relate to the safety of the community. And this is certainly one of them that, you know, this is not the first time this intersection has been a subject of intense debate. And, you know, so I have that background myself, and so does the community, that this intersection is held. And it's just not a good place to throw a bunch of traffic into unless Highways tells us that it can be done safely. And if they do, fine, then we'll proceed with the discussion of the actual development permit, you know, bits and pieces about the building, which is, as I said before, really should have been a rezoning to another zone, would have been more appropriate. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is for deferral. Any further comments? Hearing none, call the question. Anyone opposed? Call that carried. And I'll turn the chair back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Gerald, Director Gerald. Okay, so then we have item 2, which is request for subdivision frontage relief roads log run. And that's a report from the CAOBC.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay,
Mr. Chair.
seeing none.
Mr. Chair, John will speak to it if the committee
Yes,
wishes.
Steve, sorry.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
I'm sorry, I
Chairman.
didn't. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much. The applicant wishes to create a two-lot subdivision from a 29.4 hectare property situated at 2090 Lakeview Road. And given the configuration of this parcel, which comprises 3 pieces which are actually hooked across Lakeview Road, the proposed subdivided Lot A would not adhere to the 10% frontage requirement under the Local Government Act. In fact, proposed Lot A provides 2.8% highway frontage, and therefore relief from the requirements under the Local Government Act must be obtained in order for the subdivision proposal to proceed. As the proposal intends to improve subdivision design by creating 2 titles adhering to the minimum 1 hectare lot size under bylaw 64, and are currently separated by the highway right-of-way, being Lakeview Road, staff recommend approval of this proposal, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I have a question for staff, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, I saw in the report that the highway is referenced several times. What exactly is the definition of a highway?
Oh, through the chair, a highway is basically a road right-of-way. It could be anything from Highway 19 all the way down to a minor road. If it's registered on the plan of subdivision, then it's considered to be a highway, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, that explains it.
Okay, and
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead,
Director Lee. My
Go
question
ahead,
is,
Brenda.
thank you. Is this land in the ALR?
Through the chair, no, this land is not in the ALR.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if I may, so from looking at the map, I'm confused as to, there's two hooked lots. They're both hooked to the one triangular one at the top. So which are we doing? Like which ones are we moving off of? Like what's being applied for here? I'm sorry, I'm just confused.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The triangular lots will remain hooked to that very small parcel which has frontage on Mud Lake. And so the proposal is just to split off the much bigger piece to the south under separate title.
Okay, and do you know what, I didn't necessarily see it. What are the uses planned?
I believe the uses are for recreational purposes. In the middle there, you see a kind of a gap between the three parcels. That's where the old Lakeview School used to be. Used to be, I believe, a borstal of some sort initially, and then it became a Korean school. But that's not part of the proposal. But the surrounding lands are to be used for recreational cabin use. That's my understanding.
Recreational what, sorry?
Cabins or cottages.
Okay, along Mud Lake then.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you for clearing that up. All right, so is there any further discussion on this? Anyone opposed? We did have it moved and seconded, correct?
Yes.
Item B, or receipt. Where are we done?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think you just called for the vote on A. That's my understanding, since it was on the floor previous to the discussion. So if that has now passed,
Okay, so we're done.
then it would be on to item B at the committee's discretion.
I'll move B, that the committee recommend that the board approve frontage relief in accordance with S512(2) of the Local Government Act from the required 10% to 2.8% for proposed lot A as shown on the plan of subdivision attached to staff report dated September 28, 2021.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on that? I guess I have one question further, John. What would the density be on that larger property? What density would be allowed?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, of course, there is no zoning here, so we don't regulate land use in this area. But that parcel would be, let's get my magnifying glass in here to see what size it will be. Hang on just a second. It's 21.8 hectares in size, which should be, what, about 50 acres, I guess, 21.8.
Okay, so there could be quite a few cabins along there. Okay, anyone opposed?
Mm-hmm.
All right, seeing no one opposed, that's carried. On to item 3, request for commemorative gift installation Ferguson.
Move
receipt.
Second.
Staff, do you wish to speak to this?
Meredith can speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Meredith. Well,
Thank you.
welcome.
So we have received a request from Andrew Ferguson to install a bench within Hanks Beach Forest Conservation Park to commemorate the life of longtime Cortez resident Rio McCoy. The request is made on behalf of his surviving friends and family. Hanks Beach is an undeveloped park with a conservation covenant held and monitored by the Land Conservancy of BC. So this would be the first bench installed in the park and in accordance with the Conservation Covenant, is subject to approval by TLC. So the question today is that in the absence of a policy for the region, the request is being brought forward to EASC for your consideration. You can see in the report there are three options for consideration. One, that the committee recommend that the board approve the request as submitted, or option two, that the committee recommend that the board approve the request with terms and conditions attached, or option three, that the committee recommend that the board deny the request. Thank you.
Okay, and if I may ask, whatever we do here today, will that still have to be referred to TLC?
That is correct.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Very much. Go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, this isn't my area, but my personal opinion on it is that we should decline all these requests. Otherwise, there's no stopping how many requests you would get, and you could have an enormous amount of similar type requests in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any further
Yes.
comments?
Yes,
Is that a
please.
motion?
Sorry?
Is that a motion
I-
from Gerald?
No, it wasn't a motion. It was just a comment on receipt.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to speak, Mr. Chair.
Okay, on receipt.
May I speak?
On receipt, yes, you may.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, as you can see in the correspondence, there has been, I think, a couple years worth of back and forth between Mr. Ferguson and myself and staff on this. I do support this, largely because it's a 160-acre park with not one bench, not one place to sit. I don't mind at all receiving these kinds of requests. If we get a deluge of them, I'll deal with them at the time. In my 13 years here, I've only had one, and this is the second. I don't expect to be deluged with these at all. I don't particularly, Rio McCoy was a fine fellow, grew up here. I don't have a problem with the personality of that. But I think really as a public benefit, we are so squeezed for funds in the Parks Department. And to have a few sponsored benches in parks like this would be really welcomed. So after receipt is complete, I would very much like to move option one and move this along. It's been a very slow process to have somewhere for people to sit that isn't on a wet log in the middle of the winter. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on receipt? Anyone opposed? Carried. Your motion?
Could I ask that
Dr.
staff
Anderson?
just bring us up on the staff report the options 1, 2, 3, just so I can see the wording of those? It's option one that I believe on what? Yeah, so I'd like to move that the committee recommend that the board approve the request as submitted.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, seconded. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Request for item 4, request for, pardon?
No, sorry.
Somebody say something? Okay, request for commemorative gift installation. Jager?
Jager.
Okay.
Move receipt.
CAO report.
Move receipt.
Okay, on receipt. Anything? On receipt. Is there a seconder?
Second.
I think Meredith can speak to this, Mr. Chair, as well.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to the last request, this is a request for a commemorative bench in this case in Area D in Oyster Bay Shoreline Protection Park. In this case, it would be for longtime residents AFCO and Alita Jagger. And you can see from the map shown there, their preferred bench location. And so the same options apply in this instance. Option one being that the board approve the request as submitted. Option two being that the board approve the request with terms and conditions attached. And option three, that the board deny the request.
Okay, on receipt, any discussion?
Yes, I like the idea of terms and conditions attached, so that it's completely understood by the applicants that this is not a grave site. This is a happy, park place, and they're putting a plaque on an existing bench that's already been installed by the Oyster Bay Park Association in the regional district. So I don't know if they're, how much they're paying towards this, but I would just like anyone in Area D that's been given approval for a memorial site or a plaque to make sure that it is kept in as-is condition when they see the bench, and that it's not covered with Christmas lights and plastic flowers and things that would make it seem like a private site instead of a public park.
Okay, so on receipt, anyone further? Anyone opposed? It's carried. You'd like to make
I'll move the second
motion
option
for
with
number-
terms and conditions.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion? All those,
I have one
sorry,
other
anyone
thing to say.
opposed?
I think Director Lee had one more comment.
I just had one
Go ahead.
other comment, and that is that, people who worked for, decades to get that park established and worked on the park, and like the Oyster Bay Association members and the president worked very hard to get that park established and to maintain it. And, those people, I don't know how much they're recognized. I don't see, for example, Bill Burdillon, who was president and got that park established with me in 1995. I don't see his name anywhere on a park bench in that park, and people who know that park and have lived in the area for a long time would recall that some of these people, like Bill Burdillon, were instrumental and deserve to have recognition somewhere in the park. So I don't know that, and he has passed away, some time ago, but he was a major name associated with that park and, deserves some recognition. So I don't know if there could be director-sponsored requests for the same kind of thing.
And we're talking about a specific name
Jagger.
on a specific.
Okay, we're talking about Jagger,
so
but I just don't want private memorials being, supplanting our decisions to possibly recognize other people that were key in the area in developing these parks.
Okay, do you feel that your motion then for approval with conditions covers your concerns?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well,
but I just would like the staff to keep it in mind that, because we have 2 requests for Area D for Oyster Bay Park.
This is the one.
So, so there is a bit of a rush on it.
Anyone opposed? It's carried. So that was option 2. All right,
Yeah.
number 5.
Number 5 would be the same
commemorative
thing.
gift.
Same thing, option 2.
Okay, report from staff. Could I please have anything from staff on receipt?
Again, Meredith can speak to this.
Thank you through to the chair. So similarly, this request is for a bench plaque, a memorial plaque on an existing bench in Oyster Bay Shoreline Park in Electoral Area D. In this case, the request is for John Livingston, requested by his son, also John Livingston. And you can see from the map, they have identified a couple of choices. One of the choices they had identified is the bench that Jaeger had requested, so they have provided their, but their first choice that you can see on the map there is different than the Jaeger bench.
Okay.
And the options are the same. So of course, option 1, to approve the request as submitted, option 2, to approve with terms and conditions, or option 3, to deny. Thank you.
I move option 2.
Second.
Okay, and does there need to be anything on the choice, or is that to be determined with staff later?
I think they should determine with staff because they know who applied first and who has priority.
Okay, fine. So on the motion to do option 2, anyone opposed? Hearing none, carried. And then we have the Area C Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. And I will have an alternate motion after receipt.
I'll
Move
move
receipt.
receipt.
But
Second.
okay,
Mr.
so
Mr. Aniko can speak to this, and then I'm sure you have some thoughts.
yep, I do. Okay, go ahead, Aniko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is to provide the rough data that was compiled by Dylan Consulting regarding the Electoral Area C Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. Dylan has provided this draft data and has now completed their portion of the project and handed this draft data over to the SRD to complete a final draft of the ICSP. Approximately $20,000 remains in the budget to complete this work. And we are hopeful with some support from the committee or direction from the committee that this work can be completed close to or near the deadline of December 31st, 2021. It is recommended that we hire a local consultant to complete this work and provide the committee with a draft plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aniko. If I may, I have a couple of comments. Is there any objection to that?
No.
Go ahead.
None. Okay, so I was absolutely astounded at the material we got, which was very minimal to say the least, for $50,000 of 70,000 that we were so fortunate to receive in the first place. And what we got back was basically a sort of a cut and paste type of document that could apply to just about anywhere. And some would call it fluff. People have called me already since Friday, saying, what is this? Anyway, the intent, I just want to mention that the original intent of the ICSP, this was said publicly by Ralda Hansen at a board table. The intent was to provide an overview document of what people want to see in their new Quadra OCP, Quadra bylaw revisions, and the creation of the Outer Islands new OCP and new bylaw. That is what it was all about. Because right now we have a rural land use bylaw. I'm told the last one in BC, which was done in 1993. So if, that is not the intent at this time, to do those 4 things, the OCP and bylaw in 2 places, or 2 separate documents, then, stop it right now, period. It also needs to be, I need to hear it said publicly at this meeting that it's acknowledged here and now that this is a policy document. It is not a bylaw. It is guiding. It is not regulatory. And if it's considered to be otherwise or brought up later during a discussion on whether a development should go forward or whatever, if it's brought up that the ICSP doesn't allow it, then I just say scrap it right now. It's gone, because that's not what its intention was. That's not what the intention of an ICSP in general is, especially this one where we have two completely separate communities, Quadra Island and the Outer Islands. They're different. They're absolutely different. So I do have an alternate motion that I will make after I've done my rant on this receipt, and I'm done. Okay, is there anything else on receipt? Hearing none?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Are you,
I would,
I'm just wondering how are you getting my attention? Are you using the hand function? Because it's not working.
apologies, in other meetings I often do. I have not been in this one. I've just been speaking. If you'd like me to use my hand, I'm happy to do that.
Oh, that's fine. I just don't want to miss you. That's all. And like, I didn't know you wanted to speak. And I want to make sure that I give you that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I just
Okay.
woke up now. You recognize me the first chance I made. Thank you. Yeah, I
Okay.
took a scan through, certainly not at the level of detail of Director Abram, but I too was struck with its thinness of content, having not been part of the process at all, but having a tiny taste of the nature of Quadra and the Outer Islands. And I would just like to hear from staff, if staff are willing to speak to, do they think that this was a valuable process? Do they think that this was a valuable return on $50,000 investment? Is this a process that's worth continuing with? I'm quite stunned, as Jim was, with the nature and smallness of what we received, and partly I ask this as we go into discussions around budget time of our long range planning initiatives. Is this a good way of going? If we're struggling with staff capacity to get to these plans, and this is the kind of product that's rendered from consultants, perhaps there's a better way to go with engaging the social profit community to assist in doing this work. So I'd just love to hear in this specific instance what staff think about the quality and content and depth of what was delivered, and is it really wise to now take this and use this as all of the basis from which to make a plan?
Before I ask staff to answer that, I'd just like to say my piece that I totally agree with the things that you said, Director Anderson, but I don't want to put staff in a position of having judgment on others' work. And, that may be an unfair question, that's all. So, if staff feel comfortable, and it would be up to them, then fine. If not, I totally accept their uncomfortableness with answering the question. Okay, so go ahead, whoever
I
wants to deal with
appreciate
it.
the
Dave,
concern,
go.
Jim, and perhaps the invitation to staff could be of a more general nature of what would be anticipated for 50,000 for phase one of this kind of work or something.
Sure, you change the wording and that's better.
Thank you through the chair to the committee. This process was challenging right from the get-go, very clearly challenging for a number of reasons. I think there was I think the community was unclear as to what the intent of the ICSP was and still is. The process began with initial outreach to start gaining interest in the ICSP, and the community did not like the method in which that had occurred. thinking that that was the beginning of the process and the consultation that was going to happen. Then we hit COVID, not being able to come back to the community with a lot of the information that was gathered from the information sessions that we had on both Quadra and the Outer Islands. There was some change in staffing at Dillon during that time, given kind of a stalling out of the process due to COVID. So it's very, very clear that this was a challenging process, and it's taken a long time to get to where we are today. I'd like to clarify the fact that this is not the draft ICSP. They've provided us draft data and a document that we can then start filling in that data to once we have direction from the committee. This is not a regulatory document. This does hopefully provide some sort of a framework. I think what we need to remember here is that the ICSP has a whole different meaning than the OCP and the zoning bylaw would have. This really was to pull the whole electoral area C together to start finding those commonalities. And then once you get into the individual bylaws, then certainly there will be differences between the two. But I think there's been a lot of pushback on understanding how we can work together as a full electoral area and really find those commonalities, those shared visions. If that's not what the director would like to see happen, if that's not what the community would like to see happen, then perhaps it would be your decision to not move forward. If there's value in that from the committee's perspective and the community's perspective, then I think it would be worth the remaining $20,000 to provide a draft document that provides some sort of vision and overall goal for the entire electoral area. I'm hoping that provided you some input from staff's perspective. Thank you.
Okay, Nova, you had another comment, or your hand just still up?
Yeah, I have another question. And again, Mr. Chair, you might deem this to not be an appropriate question of staff, but is there ever a circumstance where we don't feel that the report delivered is worth the money contracted and not paid in full? And I'm not speaking just to this, but I've certainly experienced other plans in my time that have just fallen so short. It just seems a shame to be so far in budgetarily and 3 years in and have so little. And I didn't, just for clarity, I didn't say that this was the draft ISP. My comment was that this, as I understand it, is the data from which the draft ISP would be written. And I would love to hear any comments about, is it reasonable to try to take this and deliver an actual ISP for 20 grand? Or do we need to be budgeting staff time or more contract time or more funds in some other regard? Like, can we actually deliver with the resources we have, given the thinness and the admitted challenges in the process and the admitted sort of challenges with the uptake and understanding of the community, exacerbated by COVID? I'm really struggling with options at this point.
Okay, if staff want to say something, now's your time. If not, no big deal.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Again, to clarify, you are not seeing all of the data here. What you're seeing is a template that a bunch of raw data that we have received, not included in this report, can help populate. So there was a lot of good work that was done. There was a lot of good community input that was provided from staff's perspective. Certainly Dillon determined that, given what had occurred in this process, that it was likely best for them to finish their portion of the project and hand it over to the SRD. There was a lot of negative comments about Dillon Consulting, negative emails, negative phone calls, and it was deemed relevant to remove themselves from the process. So they have done that, and the regional district has paid for the work to date. And like I said, there is still funds remaining to provide an ICSP document for the community, if that is what the community and the area director would like to see happen. Certainly there could be staff time put into this to assist in that process. I would hate to see the amount of work that has gone into this be worthless. Like I said, I think there are some really good, valuable work that came out of this. So staff is more than willing to move forward in this process. The recommendation is that we do so, that we do, follow through in the process with the assistance of a local consulting firm. But again, certainly staff will be there and dedicating some time to provide you what we hope to be a good framework to then assist in the other bylaw reviews that we have coming up for next year. I hope that it gives some perspective to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. The one thing I just would like to say is that, if we were to proceed with the additional $20,000 for ICSP, because that's what it was designated for from UBCM, the only way that I can support that is it partly incorporates what you said, recommend that a local consultant be engaged, and I would like to fine tune that to a local area C consultant to do the work, to do the finishing touches, because that's where you're going to get your value for your dollars, and where that information that you already have, that data, can be incorporated. And we have a very large number of certified, qualified rural and urban planners on both Quadra and Reed Island. So, if I could see that being the intent of moving forward with that, otherwise I would just say, maybe what we should do is just kill it and proceed with the 4 documents that are absolutely required. Review the Quadra OCP, review of the Quadra bylaw, creation of an Outer Islands OCP, and creation of a land use bylaw for the Outer Islands. If this $20,000 could be applied to that, that would be great. But I don't know that you are capable of doing that within the parameters of the UCM rules. If not, then it would come from however we budget it. But I do not want to see just some other consulting company hired to do this job. It needs to be somebody that understands Area C is not one area. Area C is actually of 2 minds on many things. We are all one large area that does agree on a lot of the things in the ICSP, but there are things that are fine-tuned to a much greater degree in the Outer Islands than there are on Quadra Island. So, this is a really difficult one for me and for staff and for everybody, for the communities. They've been waiting with bated breath for years for this to come forward. And, now it's finally on the verge of coming forward, but it isn't much of what they were expecting. So I'm reluctant to just push on with, trying to, what's the term, make a silk purse out of a sow's ear kind of thing. I don't want to see that be our attempt. to spend the extra $20,000. I'd sooner give it back to the UBCM and proceed with the documents that are actually needed. That are needed desperately in all areas of Area C. So, those would be my comments on receipt. And I will actually make it a motion when we get to it instead of B. But is there anything else on receipt that people would like to say?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have my hand up there. So
You certainly.
just a couple comments on some things you said. First of all, the money for the ICSP is only allocated from UBCM to be used on that, so there wouldn't be any ability to use it on a grander document like an OCP or a zoning bylaw review. Second of all, if your intent is to be so specific that a local Area C consultant be hired specifically, that is going to compromise our procurement bylaw, and therefore you best include a resolution in there that the board create an exception to that.
Okay, and if that can be done, sure, you'd have to word that for me because I don't.
Or certainly, or that staff brings something back. I can tell you right off the bat, from years and years of experience, tendering, quoting, all kinds of work out, that would put us in a compromised legal position because it's not legal to do that.
Okay, well, if we need to defer this to next meeting so that you can discuss with me a better motion, I would be more than happy to do that. I would certainly defer to your experience. And Nova?
Thank you. I'm actually, I'm really sorry that we're in this position for Area C, but I'm actually at a larger level really grateful that we're beginning to have this really frank discussion that I was hoping to have last year and hope to have this year in budget around how to actually move some of these in a good way, because on Cortez we experienced the exact same thing, that rightly or wrongly we churn and chew out outside contractors, and I'm not just SRD stuff, but local economic action plan and various other things where we go through multiple contractors who fail to deliver, and then in the end it's a local team of volunteers that puts it together and produces an excellent document that is, of the highest quality. So one not only workaround, but I do know that the regional district can direct award contracts to nonprofit organizations, and there are circumstances where that happens. Certainly on Hornby and Denman with the CBRD, I can give multiple examples, but I'm sure staff knows that that is indeed legal and you don't need to put things out for tender because it's not a profit situation. So that's something that I'm going to be bringing up in the next month or two of our discussions for Cortez matters. But I wonder here, Jim, is there any social profit organization or non-profit organization in Area C that would be able to carry out this work? And maybe there's something to think on. I don't mean to put you on the spot. That could work in combination, perhaps, with some of the professionals who really have a handle on this kind of work, and could, engage with them, work with them, subcontract to them, but that ultimately the responsibility would be with a nonprofit organization, and then you can direct award. And that's something I'll be bringing forward next month.
I appreciate you bringing that forward. I didn't know that. That would certainly be part of the discussion, Dave, that I would have, if that is a possibility. I can certainly think of at least a couple of organizations that are sophisticated enough to do this work, and could possibly be direct awarded to. And Dave, you have your hand up again?
Well, Mr. Chair, this is a grander discussion, but I just want to nip this in the bud. Because an organization is a nonprofit, is not a way to skirt purchasing policy and direct award. That's just factually not true.
Okay, thank you. If I don't want to get into, a back and forth over this, I'll take your word for it at this time. And you and I can have a discussion as to how we might move forward with a better motion at a later meeting.
And I'll
So-
see if
Move
I
to
can
defer
bring
this item
some
until
info
the next
forward.
EASC meeting.
Excuse me just a second, Brenda, go ahead. Nova,
I
you
was
were
just gonna move to
finishing on
close
receipt?
debate. Yeah, okay, vote on receipt.
Okay. Is it Nova,
Yeah,
what you wanted? Go ahead and say it. I'll allow it for, before we close debate.
oh, I was going to see if I was mistaken or see if I could bring any information forward for the committee's benefit around the nonprofit award. My understanding is that Hyra on Hornby regularly receives a direct award from the CVRD and other examples of that. So if I'm mistaken, happily so, but it's been my understanding in various conferences and spaces. So I'm committing to look into that and see if I can bring anything back that might be of value.
Okay, if you do, please submit it to Dave, and Dave and I can talk about it. Thank you very much for your help. And Brenda, you wanted to close
I
debate,
just
we
wanted
can do
to
that.
close debate and refer this to the next EASC meeting.
Well, let's just finish on receipt first of all, and then we'll make a separate motion. So on receipt, all those, or anybody opposed? Hearing none. Okay, and your motion?
Move to defer this item to the next EASC meeting.
Second.
Okay, now you're deferring the whole item, or are you just deferring the
The whole
issue of?
schmear. The whole schmear.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? It's carried.
And
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Chair,
you.
I was 6 minutes late for the meeting, so I didn't get a chance to amend the agenda. I was going to request a brief verbal library report to our Electoral Area Services Committee regarding the meeting of the Library Board on on September 25th. And if I would be granted a brief presentation under new business, I'd be grateful.
Will you also be doing that at the board meeting?
I don't know if I'm going to be giving, I might give them some,
Because if you're
some of
going to
it.
give it, if you're going to give it at the board
I
meeting.
have
also,
specific
I'd
information that affects us, just the four of us.
Okay.
So
I'll put you on the list.
the specific
Hang on.
information.
Hang on. All
Pardon?
you have to do is you have an item, and I accept it, and we will hear it after Nova,
Okay.
who had requested a new business item. So go ahead.
Okay.
Nova.
I have an item, library board report for electoral areas.
Gotcha. Okay, go ahead, Nova.
Thank you. I so back in the spring when there was a report brought to us that the ambulance station's process was going to be changing from kilo guarantee to these sort of SOC positions, which are multiple quasi part-time positions. There was some concern in the spring, and we'd asked for a meeting with various stakeholders, and then that was renewed just a month or so ago. Anyway, that meeting occurred yesterday, and we had reps from BCEHS, the public, was it PHSA, the Public Health Services Association, I think, which is the Department of Ministry of Health involved, as well as somebody from Island Health, and then from BC Ambulance directly. But I was surprised that I was the only member from the board, apart from our chair, who was there in a chairing capacity, because I know at the time that this was raised, and then again, when it was raised again this fall, late summer, fall, I know that Gerald was interested, and Tassis Sabalis, and I think Sayward, and even Quadra potentially. So I'm happy to go into more detail, but I don't want to belabor it if it's not of value to the committee. But just to say that if other committee members do want to speak with me in greater detail, happy to provide that update. Or if there are other committee members here who indeed want to engage in that conversation and want some kind of follow-up, it would be valuable to know. there was a takeaway that the BC Ambulance Service and BCEHS leadership were going to connect with the staff here on Cortez, as I had been able to speak confidentially with a number of the paramedics who shared their concern with me around the implementation of this program, and wanting greater flexibility to be able to have this program really succeed over time, perhaps a kind of flexibility that wasn't needed in town, but is on Cortez anyway. So I was just surprised I was the only one there, and wondered if people just didn't get the invite or forgot or couldn't make it. But if there was any desire to be in that loop, I'd like to know that.
Okay, I'd like to comment on that, and that is that I did not get an invite. And I have registered my concern with the chair of the board, Director Unger. Everybody else got an invite.
I did not get an invite.
I didn't.
Okay.
So
Okay. Anyway,
what happened for me was there was an email sent out, I believe by Edith, to our SRD accounts, which I admittedly don't check as often as I should, because it's not the one that all my other business comes to. And that email said, hey, anybody interested in this conversation, let me know. And so probably if you didn't respond to that email, then you wouldn't have gotten an invite.
all of my emails go to my own email, and I did not get an email saying, would you like to be involved in this? Because I certainly did express concern, and I even said at the time that I was going to go to the chief of our ambulance service and the chief of our paramedics service to get their feedback, hopefully in writing, so that I could bring it to that meeting. And then never got anything about a meeting. So, that could have been a email glitch somewhere, no problem. I understand those things happen, but I didn't hear about it until after the thank yous were sent out for people that had participated. And I was not one of them because I didn't know. So I would really look forward to a second round if there was such need.
Okay, well, I will request of the chair then that at board today, I be allowed to provide the same kind of report to board, because the chair thought that the members from Tassos Zabalis were going to be there and they weren't either. So to see if we can find that there is significant interest at the board of people who weren't able to be there, and request a second meeting. So I'm hearing that Jim's interested. Is Director Lee or Director Wally interested in participating in this?
Yeah, I'd be interested in, like Jim, I never was somehow aware of it. I'm sure that the mayor of Sayward would be extremely interested in this as well.
Well, and he wasn't there. Okay, well, I'll ask to bring this up at board then.
Yeah, and I use my Gmail account. I don't go into the SRD portal, so I need to be notified on my Gmail account.
And it seems that staff rarely do that. I often ask that I be at least copied on my cortezisland.com account, but I think that really is on us now, is to monitor multiple emails.
And I get all my emails on my personal ExplorerNet account, regular basis.
Same.
So anyway, yes, I would hope that we can move forward on this and make sure that the services get notified of our feelings of, it's a really tough one, because both of the chiefs are very reluctant to speak publicly about this, because their jobs are on the line, or their standing is on the line. So it's tough to pull the information out of these folks, but I continue to try, and I'm going to do it again today. I will make another call and say, what's up with you guys? I would like a report, please. So we'll see.
And that's why I put out a public call, just publicly, not specifically to the ambulance workers, but in a public article, inviting any ambulance members to be in touch with me on a confidential basis. And so I spoke to a number of them. and then was able to kind of bring that aggregate anonymous feedback forward, because the same thing exists here. People are scared to talk.
Okay, and maybe I'll follow your lead and do it the same way. Okay, and Brenda, let's hear your report.
Thank you. The library board met on September 25th and made some pretty key decisions that affect the SRD and the electoral areas. First thing was a 3.8% budget increase, which is in line with inflation. It includes a couple of already commenced capital projects that are going to be completed in 2022. However, and I'll probably report this at the board, there's press releases out about it. The biggest decision we made on the 25th was that the Campbell River Library project is postponed and won't be happening in 2022. And that, but I've checked with our corporate officer, and the $14 million borrowing bylaw that was approved by alternate approval process a year ago, that's still good with the Municipal Finance Authority for 4 more years. So, and the library will undertake a major review of our consolidated facilities master plan and decide which projects in the next 10 years are going to be financed by VRL, and so Campbell River is on hold for a year, just so you know. So that's what affects us, and it doesn't really affect our bottom line. A slight increase in our library levy, but not significant, because of the way that the levies are applied. It's half assessment, half population, and because we have lower populations than a lot of the areas, the big towns and cities on Vancouver Island, we tend to get lower levies because of that. So ours might not come out at 3.8. It probably won't. And I should have that figure in front of me, but I don't right now. But it'll be lower than 3.8.
Okay, thank you, Brenda.
Okay.
And that brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to terminate?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we'll see you at 12:30.
Okay.
Cheerio.
Enjoy your lunch. Get a
Okay.
chance for a bite.
See you in a
All
bit.
right, see you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So